Welcome back for the rest of round 6 here at Masters Tour Seoul. As you can see here, a lot of the players chatting about how it's been going so far. Starting to look a little bit tired. It's been a long day here in day 1 with a lot of upset professional Grandmaster Hearthstone players and a lot of happy players as well, as we're going to be taking a look at in our next match here. With js5 and Tars, both of whom have been doing pretty well so far.
It's true, and this is a mage mirror that I failed to dodge, but it's all right. It's not at least the same archetype of mage. It's Cyclone Mage versus Reno Mage, which I think throughout the day we've been seeing a few different ways that the matchup can pan out.
Yeah, it's true. It's a bit of a more interesting matchup than the Reno Mage, which felt, in the matches we saw, very dependent on the Luna's Pocket Galaxy, right, and getting that off nice and early. But I feel like with the build of Cyclone Mage, you can go for a little bit more of an aggressive play style with Apprentice early on and the Mana Cyclone, which is difficult to spot when to go for, but incredibly powerful if you realize the opportunity.
Yeah, and funny that you should mention how long of a day it's been. There is a clock that's right in front of us, and it's telling me that these players have been going at it for upwards of 8 hours now. 8 hours and 40 minutes, and that is quite a marathon to run. 7 rounds of Swiss in a day. After this, we still got the very last round, and whoever has a score of at least 4 or 3 or better gets to make it to day 2.
Yeah, I believe Navi and crew may have already dipped and gone for a quick glass of soju, but the rest of the players here with a non-rubbish record here in Master Tour Seoul are still fighting it out for that chance to qualify through to day 2. Again, with 7 rounds of Swiss being played today, 4 and 3 is the record needed to qualify through. Although I think if you're getting any worse than 5 and 2, you're going to be pretty hard pressed to make it through to the top 8 at the end of day 2.
Yeah, if I recall from Vegas, the majority of the top 16 had at least a 9-3 record or better. And there will be very few among the 9-3 people that actually get to make it to that cutoff. But back in Vegas, there was the upside of automatically qualifying to Seoul and Bucharest if you had a record of 9-3 and better. But now, going 9-3 but not quite making the cut seems like the worst feeling because you're already qualified to Bucharest.
That's true. So I guess there's no consolation and they will live a life of misery and solitude. If you want to put it that way.
I mean, you could go that far if you're a little bit sadistic, just like my co-caster here, but in most cases, you could also just go and dip for a quick glass of your choice of drink. So js5, a player that we've not heard very much about. We did see a quick flag from Chinese Taipei, so another APAC player.
Yeah.
Strong representation, of course, because we are in the APAC region, and he is rocking that Cyclone Mage, which has been also a pretty popular bring here. He's got the option of going for Cyclone this turn if he wants to, but it seems a little bit awkward. Instead, gonna go Magic Trick.
Yeah, Tars on the other side, teammate of Demon, who we saw earlier on today, another French Hearthstone player, known primarily for being a little bit of a meme lord when it came to most of his lineups, and also doing being one of the best meme Hearthstone players I think we have, because you know it's very easy to bring a pile of junk to a tournament and not do very well with it. Tars often does very, very well indeed, compared to how you would expect his decks to do.
I guess it takes a meme lord to recognize a meme lord.
Recognize meme, as I always say.
And Tars, I always remember that he had this one very specific interview where I think he played the trumpet and covered the Hearthstone theme. And
yes, it was for the Global Games intro.
Yeah, he's just seen as a very jolly guy, and I appreciate that type of positivity in the scene.
Yeah, I think it was the trombone, which is somehow lamer, but so much cooler at the same time.
He could definitely play the bass to the Nomi entrance music that we heard a while ago. It went pretty much like something like that. Definitely meme music, you know?
Yes, absolutely. His cup of tea, as it were.
All right, so Tars is the first to get a threat onto the board. Twilight Drake is something that Reno Mage can run, which is definitely good against all the other versions of mages, just because it's a sizable threat that can clock away pretty easily. And yet, the other mages don't feel too good about using Ray of Frost on it when there are bigger threats.
And js5 now presented with a couple of opportunities here. He looked like he was reaching for the Evocation to just go Evocation Giant right off the bat, which makes a lot of sense, right? It's only really Voodoo Doll and Polymorph that you're very, very weak to, which is 2 cards I think is enough to start worrying about whether or not it's worth to go for a play like that.
Also, he's got a Spellbender up, so the Polymorph is one less worry.
Yes, okay. Yeah, I think that's a good enough reason then to just go for it. and hope that you can top deck the Conjurer's Calling next turn.
Right. Stars here. 1 damage short of being able to clear this with Zilliax. I think this might just be a Barista, take another Twilight Drake, and hope that there's no Conj for this giant turn.
It's close, right? Because if you go for Zilliax, I guess the idea is that they get a worse value trade for if they want to go for coin double Conjurer's Calling.
That's true.
So this maybe forces js5, if he has the Conjurer's Calling, which we can see he doesn't, into going ping Conjurer's Calling instead, which is a little bit less disastrous for Tars.
He does have a very good turn with up to 4 spells if you want, with Apprentice and Cyclone, and some mana to spare, I think. So if he gets... Well, I imagine one of the Ray of Frosts will go onto the Twilight Drake, but if you use both onto the Zilliax, then the Frostbolt can clear it. So it's actually kind of close.
Well, he could clear the Drake with the Frostbolt double Ray of Frost.
Right, with the trade.
Which is...
it's gotta be good.
Pretty tempting, yeah.
Trying to think of alternate paths. Is there any way he fits in a ping instead and maybe holds on to one of the spells?
The Frostbolt, yeah, maybe.
Wow, he's going for it. I mean, I was looking at this and just saying this seems like enough value to warrant a Cyclone, and you also develop an Apprentice on top of it. But it seems like he wants to hold out for an even better Cyclone trade. I feel like this is a bit greedy.
Yeah, I wonder, does this allow him to play the Mountain Giant on the following turn? Whereas he wouldn't have been able to do so before, but the...
Oh, he would have with the
spell
generation.
Twin Spell, yeah. Intriguing. Zephyrus here presented with a bit of a puzzle. A giant to be killed off, but a secret in the way. Is Zephyrus smart enough to know which secrets have been tested for?
I don't think so.
I'm going to go ahead and say probably not.
Yeah. If it had 1 more mana available, it would almost always give BGH, which was the perfect solution.
That's true, yeah. I guess at 4 mana, it's going to offer, like, a Hex. I mean, you want something like Deadly Shot, right? But you can't manipulate it down to 3 mana.
I think Deadly Shot is still a reasonable outcome. It probably won't even consider that the secret could possibly block something.
Yes.
But if he wants to guarantee BGH, he could go for Mountain Giant this turn. Ay.
Wow. Okay.
Wow, SI7
I underestimated you.
Hey.
Zephyrus is an intelligent card. Oh, but he's going for the SI7 Infiltrator instead to push face.
Okay. Wow, that secret came off of Magic Trick. I feel like Deadly Shot was reasonably likely of going off there. It's only CS that really
only counterspell. I guess that was bad enough for him to not want to go for it. But at the same time, he probably has the read that there's no Conjurer's Calling, right? Because I think ping Frostbolt's probably worse than ping trade Conjurer's Calling. And so I think you can have a reasonable read that leaving up this giant is not the end of the world right now.
js5, this still looks like a Cyclone turn to me. He can even fit in the Nova, although you probably don't want to be using your freezes, so...
I think the Nova's pretty good here, right? Just to preserve your board. It's heading into Flame Strike, which means that your cheaper minions are going to be struggling to survive.
You just needed to plan ahead where to put these Rays of Frost, because there's a consideration for leaving up as many minions as possible for his Sea Giant.
That's true. It would only really be good in the outcome that he gets exactly mirror image here, but I mean, it's worth considering.
Wow, that's enough
bad.
freeze to alleviate all my concerns about using a Nova here.
Pick up of Conjurer's Calling for Tars, though. He now has a couple of exciting possibilities to be thinking about. Does he save it for his own Mountain Giant to go for a big pile of taunts? Or does he just use it a little bit more proactively to try and wrestle this board back?
He is staring down lethal on board with a ping.
Ah, right, yes,
so
okay.
He must.
It has to look for...
A taunt. Or some type of charge. So, according to my quickly hashed together percentages of taunts from different mana costs, 5 mana, you're 13.8% likely to get a taunt. Well, like 13% of 5 drops are taunts. And at 4 drops, it's only, 11.8%.
Did I ever tell you how cool you are, Gia?
if that's code for nerdy, you've definitely told me that before. Yeah.
I mean, you have a pile of Hearthstone maths in front of you in a grid. But I've got to admit, I'm actually quite impressed. It is quite cool.
Well, thanks. I'm doing my best Lorinda impression right now. Impression.
There you go. That's yeah, I was wondering if I'm allowed to work that one in.
Unfortunately, no taunts did arise from this. And
That's GG.
yeah.
Ping will close it out. Tars, unfortunately, not able to take the win to advance up to 6-0. Sorry, straight away. He's gonna have to wrestle out in Game 3 up against js5. And you know, I have to imagine that js5, again, I do not know all too much about this player. It's possible he's competed in a relatively high-stakes tournament that I was not aware of. But when you start getting up to this kind of record, I think it gets a little bit scary for these players who haven't got to those high records in tournaments before. Because you start to think, oh my god, I might actually make it. And then you start falling apart. It's all of a sudden not just like your regular old ladder games or the qualification specialist tournaments that these players would have gone through to get here. And when you're up against players like of the caliber of Tars, I think that's where it starts to get the nerves settling in.
I can definitely relate to that as somebody who tried their hand at competing in Vegas, where you're in this room where probably half of them are just superstars in the field, the other half are very talented in their own right and just trying to break out and, you know, make their impression in the scene. You're very likely to land yourself in front of somebody with vastly more experience than you, and it can be very intimidating.
It really can. I think you're selling yourself short though. There's a lot of pretty poor Hearthstone players out there.
Well, sure, but I don't think they should generally make it to Seoul.
Yes, okay, good point. It is, I mean, it's a pretty stacked field. I would say even getting here is a very impressive feat in its own right. There are quite a lot of players who unfortunately did not manage to get their spot in the open qualifiers that we've been running for Seoul, despite there being a lot of them being run. Sometimes you just don't get there.
So game 2, js5 now off the coin, and Tars Reno in hand. Pretty much seems like a card you should always keep. Witchwood Piper is also just something to help you more consistently get Zephyrus, which is also a card you should almost always keep, I would think, but Tars is going to toss it back.
I guess he's thinking in this matchup he wants to save it probably for removal later on instead, just to try and find a way to wrestle back the board should he fall behind.
Sure. From js5's perspective, well, in the Cyclone versus Cyclone mirror, Luna when on the play is very good. So, I'm actually surprised that he tossed it away here. I suppose there are more answers possible from the Reno Mage.
I mean, it's competing against AI on turn 3 anyway, so it probably wasn't coming down on curve. And then if you're not playing it exactly on curve, it becomes a lot less likely to survive. And then you probably want to save it until after you find Luna's Pocket Galaxy. Which is the big consideration, right? Because in the Cyclone Mage, you have a lot fewer big minions that you can reduce with the Luna's Pocket Galaxy. However, if you find Luna herself, all your spells are so cheap that you draw your entire deck. It's a bit of an interesting dynamic.
Yeah. Well, the way this works out for js5 is pretty nice. With the double AIs, that means the Giant can come down, I think, turn 5?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, it could have even with just the one AI, but this can also help him get closer to Conjure's Calling and Elemental Evocation. Tars, however, just waiting for his turn 4 play.
It's a bit of an awkward hand to go for the Luna's Pocket Galaxy with, because it's a hand that kind of screams for a coin, just to be able to coin out the Tortolan Pilgrimist, or even just for a little bit of draw. There's no card draw in the hand to actually draw him those cheaper minions.
On the flip side, with so few minions in hand, the Luna's Pocket Galaxy is probably super high potential.
Good point. I mean, I'm saying that Luna's Pocket Galaxy on 4 is bad. It's obviously still insanely good and exactly what he wants to do.
So Magic Trick is available for js5. I could see him saving it for a Mana Cyclone turn instead, because I think the only spell he particularly wants from this is Conjure's Calling, exactly. And next turn he won't even have the mana to go Giant Conj. He could also try and look for Elemental Evocation and try to go for Conj off the top, like one or the other, right? Yeah. Another Nova never seems terrible to me.
Yeah, it was super insane in the old Cyclone Mage mirrors because there wasn't all too much answers to your big threats outside of just freezing them and delaying the inevitable. It gets a little bit more suspect, I think, against Reno Mage because they have obviously a puzzle box of Yogg Saron, they have Reno himself to wrestle back on the board, but I think it's probably still the best one to go for.
What's that you got in your pocket, Tars? Oh, a galaxy.
An entire literal galaxy.
Oh, he drew the evocation. Unfortunately, there's no way to play the 2 giants
That's
here.
what I was looking at as well. Maybe if you do it really fast, the game won't catch up yet.
The new APM mage, yes. There's some consideration to playing a Mana Cyclone. Nah, probably not nearly worth it because it involves throwing a Frostbolt face. Tempo Khadgar, I think, actually, I respect this. It just presents something that needs to be removed. Otherwise, you're threatening a very, very bad Conjurer's Calling.
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty well situated, right? Because it clearly demands an answer whether or not Tars deems that it demands an answer, whether or not the Conjurer's Calling is actually there. And it was on turn 5 when coin has been expended. So even though it was exactly 10 health, Reno's not a possibility quite yet. And it means that if you top deck Conjurers and your Khadgar survives, you just win the game on the spot. I think it was very smart.
js5 can compound the issue with another giant. He's just targets short of being able to use this Mana Cyclone. And if that's your problem, that you don't have opponents' targets to use these spells on, I think you're in a pretty good spot.
Tars playing pretty much anything here, though, will obviously open up that possibility for js5 to start unloading with these Ray of Frosts to pull himself back into the game. Twilight Drake has to look very, very tempting on this turn with, I don't know, I guess Frost Nova, and then maybe you'd even try and fit in the Ray of Frost this turn as well to reduce the health for Reno.
Well, I was going to say maybe Reno
wow,
just reduces the health for Flame Strike, but you can just
You
get
could just
the
do
God
that.
outcome.
Yeah.
7 on a single target, and the target that was damaged.
Reno, the
What?
Arcane Gatling Gun Sniper.
Is that his new title?
Yes.
The alternate card skin? Or the
Arcane Gatling Gun Sniper, yeah.
Is that the flavor text on this?
If it was up to me, Gia. If it was up to me.
That's why nothing's up to you, Dara.
That's what you think. Because you're smart and you're correct.
You just called me cool and smart in the same broadcast. This is not what I'm used to, Dara.
No, you heard wrong because your ears suck.
There. That's what I like
Yeah,
to hear.
that's
The
more like
12-year-old type insults.
Oh, that is
Frostbolt?
not bad. Conjurer's
Wow.
Calling, Frost Nova as well. Yeah, that'll do it.
I'm just looking at how much direct damage this can do.
A lot is the answer.
And the Flame Strike is not able to clear the giant despite getting the God outcome on the last turn.
Alex Straza coming off Witchwood Viper. There's something funny about that.
Yeah, the cheapest card in my deck is a 9-drop. This Frost Nova is necessary. Oh. Yeah, Ray of Frost makes a lot of sense because there is only one threat.
Yes, yeah, I like this a lot. Just save the Frost Nova for the following turn. And really just try and buy yourself time as Tars until either you somehow cheese your way out of victory or Puzzle Box, most likely. Wow.
Conjures, Sea Giants, and Frost Novas. Name a more iconic trio.
Can't quite fit in both Sea Giants and Frost Nova, but I think this is more than enough to be getting the job done for the moment.
He went for this turn rather quickly. I was looking at some way of using Cone of Cold instead, but that was just me being very greedy and stuck in my ways of playing like it's the Cyclone Mage Mirror, where you can use these situational freezes, get them out of the way, and save your better freeze effects for later. But this is definitely more than enough to seal the game. And js5 has materialized in front of us. It's got a pretty slick jacket.
That is a very slick jacket.
And Tars needs to use Frost Nova to stay alive. So that means that Conj is probably coming down on Alex Straza.
Well, he could go for Tortolan Primalist, Pilgrimist, sorry, to try and find Blizzard. Is like it's a consideration. I'm not sure if it's better at all. When, like you said, he could just go for making a much bigger board with Kunj and Frost Nova.
I think he has drawn the majority of his spells already. There might be one Frostbolt, an AI, and not too much other spells left.
Yeah.
So
Ooh.
Burly Shovel Fist. At 9 mana, you have upwards of 25% to get a rush or charge minion. There's actually a lot in that slot, so...
Wow, I was gearing up to make fun of you for a nerdy stat, but that's actually surprisingly high. Glad I know that.
I have it at 4 cards out of 15. 9 drops.
Yes.
js5 has yet another freeze effect, so I imagine we're going to see something akin to what happened last turn, which is a giant and stall.
Man, this is old school mage. This is like new mage is just the you know, Galaxy on 5 and then Lunas to just draw your whole deck. This is old school. Boards stodged up, you freeze everything every turn. Eventually someone runs out of freezes. Toxic, but in its own more charming way.
Only you could call something toxic charming, Dark. All right.
What about Toxic by Britney Spears? It's a great song.
True. Okay, you got me on that one.
Yeah.
I'd like to hear that on trombone. Bum, bum, bum.
Well, I feel like I just did.
A little bit surprising to me that js5 opted not to go for a Sea Giant this turn, because that means that if there is single target removal for one of these giants, he's suddenly not threatening lethal anymore on board.
I get what he's going for, I guess, of trying to have backup in the case of Pilgrimist into Puzzle Box on this turn, or even just Puzzle Box on turn 10.
Well, Zephyrus should give either Twisting Nether or... Shadowflame is one off being really good here.
He needs to be a little bit afraid, though, because the Secret has just been played. It was randomly generated, so very unlikely to be the counterspell, of course. But it does mean that if he wanted to go for Twisting Nether, he'd have to take a risk. Or if he wanted to go for the Brawl, which he'll very possibly be offered, he could Conjurers first. I mean, if Zephyrus was really smart, he'd get some kind of freeze, I think. Which,
wow, it is really smart.
Okay, you know what? Zephyrus has outdone himself this game. These were the perfect cards.
I didn't even look at the 2 on the right. Blizzard just caught my eye.
Yeah.
And, well, he got one off of the Tortolan anyway. And I think that was nearly, if not completely guaranteed by that point.
Yeah, I think pretty close to guaranteed. And it does mean that if Taz is unable to win on this turn or the following turn, he has the Puzzle Box of Yogg-Saron. But as it currently stands, he may just not even need it.
Well, JS still does have this, what is this, 4th freeze effect in hand.
Right. How much can he develop, though? Is that still a 2-halved Conjurer's Calling, the twin-spelled version?
I'm unsure.
Yeah.
But it seems like just the 1 Sea Giant is enough,
Yeah,
because
I guess so.
all of the giants have health above 4, and they stay alive through Flame
But
Strike.
Taz has an even another freezing effect.
Oh, true.
With the Blizzard as well.
I was thinking from JS5's perspective.
Okay,
like,
yes.
Although if he was really smart, he would know that Zephyrus is smart. And you would drink from your cup.
That's what I'm saying. It's just like Princess Bride.
You never mess with Sicilian Hearthstone players.
And while a victory for JS may have seemed truly inconceivable at the start, he's getting closer and closer. But I think with turns like that, where he's clearly just roping out, unsure what to do, Taz is probably just going to get there.
I mean, this is in line with what he did last turn by not playing the Sea Giant. He's trying to hedge around some type of Tortolan into Yogg box play, or just the Yogg box itself. But again, if there is single target removal, he's not necessarily threatening lethal. And I feel like the immediate threat of lethal is worth more than playing around certain things.
What are the odds of that? You target Pilgrimist and you get 2 Pilgrimists
So
off the Pilgrimist.
there are 31 8 drops in the standard game right now. And are you... Okay, I don't know the odds of targeting a Pilgrim. That just like, that depends on all the players in Hearthstone, but you know,
I
it's
guess your numbers couldn't help you there,
1 in
college
31?
girl.
I don't college girl. I don't even know if that's meant to be an insult. 1 in 31 squared.
Okay, I'll take that.
Yeah. That's another Nova, by the
Yeah,
way.
js5's picking up the Nova there. Well, we kind of glossed over it. Is the one thing that kept him alive in this instance. And it may actually just force Tars to go for the Yogg box.
Very well could.
Somewhat fitting for Tars, who is a player who was truly an acolyte of Yogg Saron. He absolutely loved the original Old God. Much to everyone's chagrin.
And he has already tested for CS and Spellbender by using that conch calling, so
yeah.
I think it's time.
Yeah, I agree. Flame Strike Ziliax was kind of a consideration, but even then I think it was just a little bit too flimsy.
Shriek!
Whoa!
Whoa! Shriek into caster shrieking. Alright.
The Volpira. Whoa!
Whoa!
That's garbage!
I mean, it's board development.
He's literally just discarding his entire hand. But I think, you know what, he can't be all too sad.
No way! You're happy with that,
Yeah.
you stay alive. I mean, it seems like the consensus has been that you play Yogg's box when you're behind because it tends to remove boards and develop boards, and well, it did exactly that.
But at what cost? Don't know,
Well,
I
he
said
still
that in a
has-
free real estate voice.
You still got this POC for follow-up. And as far as 6 drops go, there are 2 of them with charge. Can you name them, Dara?
There are 2 6-drops with charge. Reckless Rocketeer
Yeah?
and Argent Commander.
You did it!
Hey.
The nuts. So, Reckless Rocketeer would... I don't even remember what secret this is anymore.
It's Vaporize, right, I think?
Okay, so there's no chance of presenting lethal through the secret. Because he doesn't have the mana to ping because he's overloaded.
Yes, you're correct. Does that mean that it will lead him to a Flame Strike, perhaps, instead?
Well, if he's been keeping track, he should know there are 3 bananas. Oh, this Reno is not active with the battle cry.
Is it ever Spark Drill? Probably not, right? You trade in. I mean, it means that you can only get 1 draw for your opponent off of the Acolyte of Pain, which, if they buff it up, could be significantly scarier than that. Especially with an Archmage Antonidas, that's pretty nuts.
So, 8 on board. He could go for just Antonidas Barrier and then send all of this face. It doesn't quite present lethal, though. So he just needs to be aware of what are the lethal outs from Tars, and I think we've seen the Frostbolt used.
When Master's Call discovers a minion instead of 3 beasts, it doesn't discard the other options, does it? It just...
No, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I was just wondering, because it draws them when you play Master's Call. But
it's a very strange card.
It is a bit of a strange interaction. But yeah, okay, I think you're right. I was just wondering if Tars had maybe discarded the Luna as a potential out.
I think this makes a lot more sense. So he's still removing damage, essentially what Ice Barrier does, but at the same time developing board and getting more fireballs. Siamat.
You can go Flame Strike, ping Siamat, complete board clear.
But no way to play around double fireball.
No way to play around double fireball. No lifesteal. That's just game. He can't even survive from his perspective. Does look like the streak for Tars, the 5-0 streak, is coming to an end at a 5-1 record. Still in with a very, very good chance of making that top cut tomorrow of likely 9-3 minimum. will be able to get him through. But even then, you need good tiebreakers. However, starting 5-0 is a good way to get there, because I doubt many players will be able to get a better start to the tournament than that. Wins at the start tend to be more valuable than losing at first and then catching up afterwards.
Right. It's just like double elimination, but not quite so pronounced. But it obviously helps a lot with your tiebreaker when you win early, and also when the people you beat don't drop early. Although that's something that cannot be helped.
Yeah, that's true. You just want to hope that everyone that you destroyed does pretty well afterwards. But yes, that is going to be it for that particular match in round 6. We're almost done here today. Just got a little bit of extra round 7 to bring you. But I think we have one more match from round 6 after this. Whatever it is, we'll be right back after a quick break here at Masters Tour Seoul.